A trio of new challenges, a devastating hurricane, escalating conflict in the Mideast, and a dockworkers strike threatening the U.S. economy, loom over the final weeks of the presidential campaign and could influence public sentiment as voters choose between Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump. How these events unfold, and how the candidates respond, could be crucial as they vie for votes in battleground states. Sitting President Joe Biden is still responsible for the U.S. economy and foreign policy amid this turmoil and may ultimately be held accountable for their outcomes. However, Harris and Trump's approaches to these issues could significantly affect how Americans view their choices this November. Unfortunately, events like this happen, and this is where presidential leadership shines, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters on Tuesday. This should send a message to Americans: it matters who sits behind the resolute desk. Harris, with Biden's support, is aiming to project steady calm as multiple challenges arise simultaneously. On Tuesday, she and Biden shifted between managing Hurricane Helene recovery efforts and huddling with aides in the White House Situation Room to monitor U.S. support for Israel in its defense against a significant Iranian attack in retaliation for the killing of Hezbollah leaders. Meanwhile, they maintained close contact with economic advisors as dockworkers went on strike Tuesday. The strike affected ports from Maine to Texas and threatened to disrupt supply chains, cause shortages, and raise prices if it continued for over a few weeks. Trump, for his part, criticized Harris as being overwhelmed, claiming that such a crisis wouldn't have occurred under his leadership. "We have been talking about World War III, and I don't want to make predictions," Trump said at a campaign event in Wisconsin. "The whole world is laughing at us. That's why Israel was attacked recently. They don't respect our country anymore." However, voters rejected Trump 4 years ago largely due to their perception of his handling of the economic, social, and public health challenges arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking to reporters before meeting with aides Tuesday to discuss the ongoing hurricane response, Biden acknowledged the growing frustration with the federal reaction to the massive storm. "I've been in frequent contact with governors and leaders in the affected areas, and we need to jumpstart this recovery process," he said. He traveled to the Carolinas on Wednesday to assess the hurricane devastation and is also expected to visit impacted areas in Georgia and Florida later this week. "People are scared to death. They wonder if they're going to make it." Harris headed to Georgia on Wednesday and will visit North Carolina in the coming days for similar reasons. Tuesday's vice presidential debate showcased how both campaigns reacted to recent events to bolster their messages and sharpen their attacks. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz promised steady leadership under Harris, while Ohio Senator J.D. Vance pledged a return to peace through strength if Trump regains the White House. Biden has remained off the campaign trail since announcing in July that he was ending his re-election effort amid sliding public approval ratings. His absence suggests that Democrats view him as more of a liability than an asset for Harris, according to Christopher Borick, director of the Muhlenberg College Institute of Public Opinion in Pennsylvania. How Biden manages these recent emergencies could significantly influence how undecided voters perceive Harris in the final days. "President Biden can't help Kamala Harris on the stump," Borick said. "But in a campaign where every vote counts, his handling of these crises could make a difference." The Harris campaign recognizes the risks of multiple crises converging, particularly given their unpredictable nature. A prolonged strike, a poor disaster response, or an escalating Middle East conflict could raise doubts about Biden's leadership and, by extension, Harris's. At the same time, Harris's aides see this moment as an opportunity to show voters the stakes of leadership and their seriousness about the role, according to officials who spoke anonymously about internal strategies. In a speech in Waunakee, Wisconsin, and social media posts Tuesday, the former president expressed concern for those affected by Helene while criticizing Harris over the dockworkers' strike, stating, "The situation should have never come to this, and had I been president, it wouldn't have." Harris's aides made sure she delivered brief remarks on the Iranian attack Tuesday while taping campaign interviews, aiming to portray her as ready to lead. Late-term turmoil has been typical in American presidential politics, sometimes due to scandal and other times with an incumbent trying to show stability during uncertain times. George W. Bush pushed a rescue package through Congress to stabilize the financial system with the Troubled Asset Relief Program amid fears of economic collapse. This didn't help Republican John McCain in his loss to Barack Obama. Jimmy Carter's 1980 re-election campaign was paralyzed by the Iran hostage crisis, with 52 hostages released shortly after Ronald Reagan's inauguration. Lyndon Johnson halted bombings in North Vietnam days before the 1968 election, hoping to push for peace, but the South Vietnamese refused to negotiate, and Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphrey, narrowly lost to Richard Nixon. The efforts by incumbents to assist themselves or their party's nominee with October surprises go back quite a ways, said Edward France, a historian at the University of Indianapolis. In this current climate, it's unclear how many voters can be swayed by a candidate trying to show competency so late in the game,